Hello, 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 and welcome back to another edition of Fan Talk, your favorite podcast by your favorite fan. There we go. We got the sign not fully up, but we at least got the sign in the background. Fan Talk is a podcast that you can find anywhere you get your podcast, hosted by your favorite fan. That is me, of course, Kyle Brenchley, in the house on this rainy Tuesday. Yesterday it was like 89 degrees, and today it is 52 degrees. Absolutely love it. This is the best weather in my opinion. I know it's an unpopular opinion, but cloudy, overcast, 50s, a little bit of rain, a little bit of wind. Sign me up. All right, we got the candle burning. Of course, the Fan Talk sign in the background. Still working on getting the Rogue One poster up. You would think that decorating your room wouldn't take a whole month, but it does. It does. And I haven't quite gotten there yet, so be patient with me. But thank you guys for tuning into Fan Talk. Today we are talking NBA draft and the lottery system that the draft uses. We'll be talking about where the Utah Jazz landed in the draft lottery. We'll be talking about Jayson Tatum's injury that may just end the Celtics season, and Giannis Antetokounmpo wants a trade, possibly? All that and more here on Fan Talk. It's going to be a fun episode today, so sit back and relax as we take you on this magical ride that is sports fandom. All right, so if you guys don't remember, the NBA draft is different than the NFL draft. Now, the NFL draft just happened about a month ago, and the NFL draft, simply put, if you have the worst record, if you're the worst team in the league, you get the number one pick. It's guaranteed. And then it's just ordered from there. So if you're the second worst team, then you get the second pick, right? The NBA does it differently. They do a draft lottery. So how it works, and it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's complex, I wouldn't say it's easy. It's kind of somewhere in the middle to understand. But for the sake of this video and for the sake of you, maybe you guys out there who are dummies, sports dummies, right? I'll dumb it down for you. The bottom three teams, so the three worst teams with the worst records, they all have the same statistical odds to get the number one pick. So, for example, the three worst teams were the Utah Jazz, the Washington Wizards, and the Charlotte Hornets. They all had the same statistical odds, which was 14%, to land the number one pick. But there were other teams that were in the mix as well. So every team that doesn't make the playoffs is put into the draft lottery. So even teams that make the play-in, remember I did a video on the play-in tournament, even if you make the play-in tournament but don't actually advance to the actual playoffs, you can still qualify for the draft lottery. For example, in 2024, last year, the Atlanta Hawks made the play-in tournament in the East. If they would have won, they would have gone on to the playoffs, but they lost and they didn't get in. And so they were put into the draft lottery system. They ended up getting the number one pick, even though they only had like a 3% chance or something like that. Not very high. But they still got the number one pick. And so they're like, hey, that's kind of cool. We almost made the playoffs, and we got the number one pick. Now, the same thing happened this year, except for take out the Atlanta Hawks and bring in the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks made the NBA play-in tournament. They were this close. I don't know. This is an exaggeration. They were close to getting into the NBA playoffs. They actually won the first game, beat the Kings, but then lost the second game and did not get in because they were the 10 seed and they had a long way to go. They needed to win both games. And so they got put into the draft lottery system. So they statistically only had a 1.8% chance to land the number one pick. Now, every year the number one pick is a big deal, but especially this year with Cooper Flagg coming out of Duke and one of the highest rated college players in recent history, Cooper Flagg, so much hype around him, every team wants Cooper Flagg. So the Dallas Mavericks are now in on the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes. Now, let's talk about the Utah Jazz. I know a lot of you are Jazz fans. I'm a Jazz fan. I'm from Utah. And there hasn't really ever been, there's never been a number one pick by the Utah Jazz. There's never really been a huge, big-time player that gets drafted, first overall by the Utah Jazz. And so kind of a timeline here, and as you know, and if you don't know, kind of where the Jazz were, they were the worst team in the league. How they got there was, if you remember, a few years back, they had Donovan Mitchell, they had Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley, Boban Bogdanovic, Jordan Clarkson. They had a bunch of these players surrounded around, Donovan Mitchell was their star, surrounded by a bunch of these players, right? and they were in the playoffs. I think, what was it, 6 or 7 years in a row, but just couldn't get past the second round. And so this is what teams do. If it's not working, if you're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, that is the definition of insanity, right? So if it's not working, and unfortunately in professional sports, results are expected, like, great, you went to the playoffs 7 times, but you didn't win anything, so they ultimately decided to tear it down. And so they traded Donovan Mitchell, they traded Rudy Gobert for a buttload of draft picks, and they entered a rebuilding period. This is not anything unique. Teams do this all the time, not even just in the NBA, but you look at baseball, you look at NFL football, even NHL hockey. Teams do this all the time. If their current lineup's not working, they trade away their best players, try to get draft picks, and draft new guys to fill in the spots. So that's where the Jazz have been the last couple years. This year, they're obviously the worst team in the league. The last 2 years, they were obviously not in the playoff race, but they weren't the bottom team. They were kind of mid-bottom. But this year, they finally got to the bottom. And the hope was, this is the year that we tank, right? They don't want to admit that they officially did it because technically you're not supposed to do that. But this is the year that we tank and get Cooper Flagg with the first overall pick. And that sounds great. Hey, just, put out your young players, put out these guys that you've drafted who don't have a lot of experience, let them get experience. They'll probably lose most of the games because they're playing against guys who have played, multiple years. And then we can get Cooper Flagg and then we can go from there. And that's all great and dandy. But remember what I said earlier about the Atlanta Hawks in 2024 and now the Dallas Mavericks in 2025? Both those teams tried to win. They were trying to win. They were trying to get into the playoffs. They made the play-in tournament, and then they ended up not winning, and they were put in the draft lottery odds. Yes, I know I'm hearing you say, but Kyle, their odds were so much smaller, and the Jazz, when they tanked, they got 14%, which is as high as you can get, whereas the Mavericks were only 1.8%, and the Hawks were only 3%. Yes, I do hear you. And statistically, from that standpoint, it would make more sense to try and tank than to try and win. But let me tell you, where has it gotten you, right? Where did tanking in 2025 get the Utah Jazz? Where did it get you? So you're not playing your stars, Lauri Markkanen, Walker Kessler, Jordan Clarkson. These guys were not playing most of the season. They weren't. They were just sitting out. They weren't playing most of the season. Load management is the official term you use in that situation. You're playing your young guys. Cool, we get to see the young guys, but you're losing by 20, 30 points every single game, not even just on the road, but at home. You're not putting out a good product. It's absolutely ugly. The fans hate to see it. I mean, the fans have been awesome through this. You go to the Delta Center and it's like almost full to watch their 13-win Jazz team step on the court and lose by 41 to the Chicago Bulls, a mid-team like the Chicago Bulls. And you're just like, man, these fans deserve better. These players deserve better. It's hard to ask players to say, hey, we're rebuilding and our goal here is to suck, so go out there and suck. You know what I mean? Like obviously you don't say those exact words, but that's essentially what you're asking of your players, is to be patient, because we're trying to rebuild for the future. And honestly, these players might not even be a part of the future. These players might just be here for a little bit. And so it's a lot to ask of the players. It's a lot to ask of the coach. Will Hardy doesn't want to lose. It's a lot to ask of the fans, of the community, just to get ousted and not even get the first pick. The Jazz ended up with the 5th pick, which is the lowest they were guaranteed a top 5 pick. They got number 5. So all that heartache, all that pain for the last 3 seasons, culminating in the worst season in franchise history, just to get the 5th pick? I mean, come on. The Dallas Mavericks almost made the playoffs and they get the first pick. So I made a video a while back about my beef with tanking. I hope that my limited audience here, I don't know, maybe you guys go tell your friends if you agree with me, but to my limited audience here, hear me out. Tanking is not worth it in the NBA. No team should tank. I mean, go ahead and tank. See how it works out for you. But the team with the worst record, at least the last 5 drafts, have not gotten the number 1 overall pick. It's a lottery system. It's a gamble. Everything's a gamble, right? So why don't you just try to win? Try to win. Get into the NBA play-in tournament. And if you don't, And then you try your hardest, and if you happen to lose, great, you're now in the draft lottery. If you do try your hardest, you get into the playoffs, great, you're in the playoffs, right? Try to win. This is the NBA. And the only way you get better is not by losing. The only way you get better is by trying to win and then letting the cards fall where they may, right? Be smart with your draft picks. You can draft great players if they're not number one overall. Cooper Flagg's not going to be the only good player in this draft. I know the media is always talking about the number one overall pick. Number 5, you can get a solid guy at number 5, right? And they have a couple other picks in the first and second round. So it's like draft some good guys in the first and second round and try to win. Try to win. And this is not just for the Utah Jazz. This is for the Washington Wizards. This is for the Charlotte Hornets. Look at the Detroit Pistons. They finally got on track. They finally got out of the rut of sucking and drafting and finally getting there. So, but I mean, at what cost? 9-10 years of absolutely abysmal basketball? It's just not, I just don't like seeing it. I just don't like seeing that. And I know many fans like you guys don't like seeing it either. Let me just quote here what Ryan Smith, owner of the Utah Jazz, tweeted out this morning. He said, "Woke up frustrated, went for a run, audibly screamed, sun peeked over our mountains, ran into a fellow disappointed Jazz fan, remembered, this is Utah. So, getting back on the horse with the best fans in the league because it's what we do here. Gold doesn't change." So, lesson in life, if things do not go your way, even if you tried your best to be in a position to get what you want, to do what you want, to be where you want to be, and it still doesn't work out for you, get back on the horse. Get back up and keep moving forward because that is the only thing you can do. You can't just stop. You can't just sit down on the side of the road and say, I'm done. If things didn't go my way, I did all that I could. It's out of my hands. No, you are the captain of this ship. And just because you hit the reef or just because you got beached this one time, let's get the ship back out to sea and let's go and chase our goals, go chase our dreams. That's exactly what the Utah Jazz are going to do, according to Ryan Smith. So yeah, that's kind of what happened with the whole draft lottery. You're probably wondering, how did the Mavericks end up in there? But there's a whole lot of finer details. If you are interested, you can just look into it a little bit more. But the Dallas Mavericks come away with the first overall pick. Jazz end up with number 5. The NBA draft is going to be June 25th and 26th. So in about a month, we'll do an episode about that. We'll see what happens there. All right, let's stay with the NBA. Big news out of Boston. Last night, the Celtics lost Game 4 to the New York Knicks. The New York Knicks are now up 3-1. Boston Celtics forward Jayson Tatum, arguably one of the best players in the NBA, for his Achilles. Ruptured, I guess is the correct term. Ruptured right Achilles tendon, so he's going to have to do surgery. And he's obviously going to be out for the rest of the playoffs. He might even miss a significant amount of time next season, if not entirely. So that is unfortunate, not just for the Boston Celtics this year, who are down 3-1, probably going to lose to the Knicks. But even next year, what are they going to do without their star Jayson Tatum? They don't have many draft picks. They don't have a lot of money to spend on free agents. They might take a significant step back next season. Speaking of taking a step, maybe not back, but a step in a new direction, Giannis Antetokounmpo, star forward for the Milwaukee Bucks, has been there for, I think, 7 or 8 seasons is how long Giannis has been there. He's been the face of that franchise, won them the championship, of course, in 2021, if you remember. Giannis Antetokounmpo says that he is open, doesn't say he wants to, doesn't say he wants out, doesn't say he's demanding a trade, but he is open to the possibility of playing for a new NBA team. Now, this is big time news because Giannis arguably having one of his best seasons of his career, still getting better as time goes on. Obviously, he was kind of the main guy this year. He is now 30 years old and he's still under contract, so he's obviously not a free agent, but it would have to be a trade that the Bucks would have to do if Giannis really wants to do that. So he's going to meet with the Bucks. They're going to discuss. They're going to see what trade possibilities. They're going to see what they can do to try to get him to stay or what they can get for him. There's going to be a lot of things that they're going to discuss. But you might be wondering, what teams could Giannis realistically go to? Now, it's not like NBA 2K where you can just request a trade and get traded to any team that you want. There's money involved, there's logistics involved, there's players, there's contracts, there's all sorts of things. So there are arguably 2 teams that realistically really have a good shot if they are interested There's a couple teams that could throw a lot of draft picks at him. And then there's a couple wildcard teams that could surprise us and jump into the Giannis Antetokounmpo sweepstakes. And of course, again, this is if. A very big if. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this until talks get more serious, but I will just mention a few of the teams that Giannis could end up playing for in the future. And those two teams that I mentioned earlier that have a legitimately good shot, the first one is Houston Rockets. Now, they are kind of walking a financial tightrope. They have enough money, but they're going to have to maybe let some guys walk in free agency. They're going to maybe have to restructure some contracts. There's a whole lot of things that are going to have to go into it. But the Houston Rockets could arguably get Giannis Antetokounmpo. And can you imagine him pairing up with Jalen Green, with Sagoon, with, I don't know if they keep Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks? I mean, like, it could be interesting to see that dynamic there, you know? It could be a very dangerous team. I don't know. We'll have to see. The other team, we're staying in Texas. Texas and basketball is having themselves a day. The San Antonio Spurs could potentially get Giannis Antetokounmpo. Can you imagine Giannis, Victor Wembanyama, De'Aaron Fox, the big three of San Antonio? I mean, Chris Paul is a free agent. He's getting old. He's just kind of there just to be there. He might not even be a part of the future. But Devin Vaskell, Harrison Barnes, Stephon Castle, you got these good guys that build around Victor Wembanyama, De'Aaron Fox, and potentially Giannis Antetokounmpo. The Spurs may be back. Holy cow. A couple teams that could throw a bunch of picks at them. The Brooklyn Nets, they've been pretty bad for a long time. That's because they, traded Kevin Durant and James Harden and Kyrie Irving away and got a bunch of picks. They could pair him up if they keep like Cam Thomas and De'Aaron Sharp. Could be interesting with D'Angelo Russell and DeAnthony Melton. Could be interesting. I don't know. Nick Claxton, Noah Clowney. Young team could be somewhere that Giannis can land. Another team that could throw a bunch of picks at him is the Utah Jazz. Especially now that they didn't land the number 1 pick. Maybe they'd be like, hey, let's just trade our top 5 pick and try to get Giannis Antetokounmpo and try to win right now. We already have a bunch of young good guys like Isaiah Collier, Colin Sexton, Bryce Sensabaugh. You got Kyle Filipowski. Maybe we just add, 30-year-old. He's got, at least 6 more years left under his belt. Like maybe that's something that we could potentially do. And of course, the wild cards, now that the Dallas Mavericks have landed the number 1 pick, they could use that number 1 pick to entice to, trade to the Milwaukee Bucks if they wanted to get Giannis instead of Cooper Flagg. The Detroit Pistons, the Memphis Grizzlies, New Orleans Pelicans. The list goes on and on. If you want to check out the full list, ESPN did a little article about it that you can look up and learn more about. But will Giannis be in a new place next season? Who knows? Who knows? The future of Jayson Tatum's injury. A lot of unknown in the NBA right now. What will the Jazz do with their top 5 pick? Will they trade it? Will they use it? Who are they going to draft? Where are they going to go? A lot of uncertainty right now, but life is full of uncertainty, and you just got to keep moving forward because life is amazing. Life is great, and I'm not just talking about sports. I'm talking about life in general. For all the bad out there, there's a million times more good things out there, so look for the good in your life and put that out there, broadcast that out there. I appreciate you guys listening and or watching Fan Talk today. Again, Fan Talk's podcast you can get anywhere you get your podcasts. I upload on YouTube. Search Kyle Brenchley at Fan Talk. I appreciate likes, comments, subscribes, anything you want to give to me. I appreciate it. And you guys go have an amazing Tuesday. The club's going up on a Tuesday, so go hit it up. And I'll catch you guys next week for another edition of Fan.